What makes a manager irresistible in a world where AI is doing the listening, advising, and even leading? In this episode of The People Blueprint, we sit down with Bhushan Kulkarni, a seasoned learning professional, certified coach, and the author of the book, The Irresistible Manager. With over 2 decades of experience, Bhushan unpacks what makes leadership not just efficient, but human. From AI's rise in decision making to the enduring need for mentorship, we explore how managers must evolve to stay meaningful, humane, and future ready. Let's jump into the first episode of The People Blueprint. Welcome to The People Blueprint, where we explore the future of work through the lens of learning, leadership, and people strategy. I'm your host, Sheila Vasan Singla, and it is my pleasure today to have Bhushan Kulkarni on the show. Bhushan is a seasoned L&D leader with over 22 years of experience, out of which 16 have been deeply rooted in organizational learning and development. He's also an executive coach and the author of a book called The Irresistible Manager, a timely book in times of disruption where leaders need to learn how to lead in a world which is changing so fast. Welcome to the show, Bhushan. I'm so happy that you're here with us today.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Indeed, a pleasure for me to be on this show. So thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So, Bhushan, you have been in learning for 16 years. So let's do a little flashback. Let's go back to 2015. And I want you to tell me what has changed in the way we learn, how we absorb information, how we build capability. How has it changed from 2015 to 2025?
Oh, that's a loaded question, and thank you for that, Sheila. One thing, from 95 to 2015, if you really look at the 20 years got replicated into these 10 years. So what I'm saying is the acceleration of change has doubled. So that's a good news. But that also can pose the challenges. Now, I want to articulate this at three levels. One is at a learner level, other is at an ecosystem level, the learning ecosystem level, and the third is at the technology level.
Okay.
So at a learner level, what has happened? Because they have an exposure to many things today, they have grown a little impatient in terms of. So impatience is something that the learning professionals have to deal with when they are curating or creating any content for them. Second, there are just too many distractions for today's learners. Too many distractions using social media and all, which wasn't the case as much in 2015, right? And hence today's learning professionals have to keep that in mind. And today's learner is overwhelmed with the kind of information that is being thrown at him. One research says that there are some 74 GB of data that is being thrown at learner every day, which is equal to high definition, some 7-8 movies every day. Imagine this person is requiring to process that information. So this has shifted for learner today, and hence we need to curate few things from the learner level. What has shifted from the ecosystem level is learning has moved from event-based, right, to sequence-based kind of a thing. So earlier in 2015, it was okay for someone to do one kind of a program. Let's say if someone was doing on negotiation skills, a one-off program, and the learner would get overwhelmed. Today, that is not the case. Today, you have to actually plan and think as to how do you have a series of interventions so that a person sees a fundamental shift in that movement. At a leadership level, when I interact with leaders to curate programs, either at a leadership level or other learning levels, I have seen earlier it was okay and it was expected also that leaders know all the answers. And leaders also had that kind of an orientation. But today, it is not the case. Including the leaders, everyone knows that they will not have answers to everything that is evolving for them or for the organization. And hence, learn it all from know it all, that kind of shift that we see. So those are the learning ecosystem shifts that we are seeing there. The third is the technology. Today, because of the digital platforms, learning is in a way commoditized. It is democratized, okay? That gives access to people from across. So and it has become a great leveler, So whether I'm in a metro or a non-metro or a very small town, it really doesn't matter. I'm still connected to the world, and I have equal access wherever I am in the world in that sense. So I think from 2015, this is what has shifted significantly.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head because one, yes, learning has become completely democratized. You don't need to depend on anybody to get that learning now. Second, the way people are learning has also changed.
Yes.
And I think the capabilities that we are looking at now, while a lot of what we used to focus on remains,
Yeah.
I think some new ones have also crept in, and those new ones are really difficult ones.
Yes.
And I think because of that, I believe the purpose of L&D in organizations has changed. So in your perspective,
Yeah.
what about the purpose of L&D has really shifted?
Two levels. One is earlier it was okay that I called myself as content delivery person. And if I delivered that, people were happy. I was happy. But today that has shifted from content delivery to context creation. So a learning and development professional today is expected to create a context without which they do not have the seat at the table.
And you're so right, because that has been something that we've always believed, that unless there is a context and a relevance,
Yeah.
everything you do is just pie in the sky.
Absolutely.
It's a waste of organizational
Absolutely.
resources and time.
I agree.
There's so many trends that are happening today in learning, and we are constantly seeing new things happening. And,
Yes.
there's always a flavor of the month. What is the one trend
Yeah.
that excites you, and what is the one trend that worries you?
Rather two that excite me.
Okay.
One is learning in the flow of work.
Okay.
So people today, they want something instantly available to solve the problem when they're working. Now that poses an opportunity and the challenge as well, but that is an exciting trend.
Okay.
So you can offer them immediate solutions and you can earn the respect. So micro learning and all those.
Drip learning.
Yeah, drip learning. All of that is taking traction, and that's a good thing because that is solving the problem for them, right? And the second one is AI personalization. To my mind, it offers a customized offering. It changes the way I want to learn, and that's the best part. So it actually takes care of the global principle that we talk about, n is equal to 1. Can I customize to that one individual? Can learning get customized to that one individual? We have always spoken about it, but it has always been difficult. Now, that is a breakthrough that AI can offer to us. And in some use cases that when I interact with leaders, I see that that's happening.
And what's the one thing that worries you?
What worries me is over-reliance on technology. What worries me is availability of that presumption that availability of content on tech platform is equal to capability building. That is not the case.
And that is so true. Just because you know, it doesn't mean you know how to do.
Correct. Absolutely.
And that is the challenge that I will see emerging in organizations. And it reminds me of the time, Bhushan, when Chrysalis was about 10 years old or so. And books were very easily available in India. So when you take a look at books that came into being about 20 years ago,
Yeah.
everybody had access to leadership books. But it didn't mean that leadership automatically became great just because you read a book.
True.
So what you're saying is so true, that an over-dependence on a platform, or just because you have a great platform with great content, it doesn't mean that capability will get built.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't also mean that you're evolved as a professional.
Yes.
Just by reading, evolution doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So Bhushan, in today's world, we are talking about managers in an AI-powered world, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to know that we are hearing things like AI can be a CEO. We are seeing agentic AIs that are coaching, that are counseling, that are giving you guidance, and even offer empathy in a very programmed manner.
Yeah.
Very interesting, but it brings this big question to the forefront, that do we need managers at all then?
Very interesting question. And not only on the AI side, Sheila, there were other questions that pointed out to the same question again, saying, do we need managers? And while introducing me, you did mention about the book. That is precisely one very important reason why I wrote this book, the irresistible manager. In all these disruptions, AI being one of them, or AI wave being one of them, how do you still hold your grounds? What do you need to change? So, to answer your question, it's an emphatic yes. Do we need managers today? Of course, yes, we need managers today. What AI can do is give a lot of other things in terms of analytics, in terms of, and I'll talk to you about the framework that one professor I was referring to, and when I was kind of doing research of my chapter on this, which is managers and AI and the coming wave of AI. And while doing that research, I came across with a very powerful framework, and I'll talk about that. But for now, do we need managers? Yes. Why? AI can do the rational bit, some bit of emotional experimentation that you referred to that's going on. But what managers can bring is the context, the meaning to the emotions that people are experiencing, including themselves. So, hence, the answer is yes, we need them.
So you're saying that there are certain things that AI can replicate.
Yes.
And I do believe they can. It can.
Yes.
And there are certain things that it can't replicate at all.
Correct.
And you're telling me that what it can't replicate is the context setting, the relevance bringing, the sense making.
Absolutely.
Tell me, what else do you believe that AI can replicate and can't replicate at all?
Let me take the reference of the research framework that I came across, which I was talking a while back. So Professor Das Narayan Das teaches at Harvard Business School.
Okay.
And he's an expert in this area.
Okay.
So he said that there are three ways in which we can look at AI. One, they can be prescriptive. That's the first framework part that he gives out of the three-legged framework that he's talking about. So that has its own application when doctors can use it in terms of, prescribing. So AI can recommend them few things, but still the final decision is human being who takes that final decision. And that is something. And this is one example. And there are 100 such examples in different professions. The other is predictive. Lot of analysis can be done. There are analytics teams. So they were doing a particular kind of task, but with AI coming in, that can act as their assistant and their productivity can get enhanced through that predictive analytics.
Got it.
And the third one is autonomous, which is something which keeps bothering us, saying, oh, AI starts thinking on his own. What do we do? Will we have work and not? So there is a coexistence framework that is being built around autonomous. And the recommendation that I also then in my chapter has basis this research is managers and AI can coexist. It's just that if there are 5 things that I was doing in the past as manager, those 5 things in future could be different. But there will still be a need of manager. So there are few things AI can replicate for me as manager and as human beings. There are few things it will definitely not be able to do, at least as for today's knowledge that we have.
What do you think are the uniquely human spaces that a manager will need to operate in?
The first and foremost, to my mind, Sheila, is sense making. Yeah? AI can give you the context. AI can give you a lot of data. But manager will still have to make sense out of it for him or her and for their team or the ecosystem that they operate in. The second is creating belongingness. So look, what the discussion is happening. I mean, people are talking about, will I have my job? What will I be doing? And all of that. When a group comes together, and if they come together with this kind of a feeling, right? Where is that positive hopefulness? And we are not talking of giving any false hopefulness. We are talking of something really solid, which a manager has to take efforts and talk about, saying how do we as a collective can still be more productive and use AI as our assistant rather than a master.
When I'm hearing you speak, I'm actually thinking of how in this world that will be driven by AI, we need to become more human.
Absolutely.
I think in the past few years, leaders and managers, because they've been so driven by results, multifunctional roles, matrix operating organizations, there has been an erosion of the humaneness of a leader. we don't really know our people too well. We don't have time to sit and chat. Add to it this entire skin of, you're encroaching on my personal space. So I won't even ask you if you're unwell. I won't ask you beyond a level because I don't want to intrude on your personal space. And I also see that there will be a certain amount of reframing
Yeah.
of what a manager will do. A manager will become a catalyst, a coach, a guide, a mentor,
Correct.
almost like a philosopher, friend, and guide. That kind of
Yes.
role is what a manager will play.
True.
But do you think this kind of changed role will also lead to changed expectations from the organization and from the team member who has a manager?
Certainly, yes, and I really like what you said about the changes that are happening in eternal optimism is not in the air, and it's rooted in solid groundwork and obviously coming from your experience. But what the organizations will have to do is to really create a conducive environment. While they will expect a change, but how that change gets facilitated is going to be very important. So if they expect a manager to be more, connecting and coaching as compared to command and control, that's a major shift for that individual. So how does that transition happen? If the organization expects to move from performance focused conversation to potential focused conversation, that's a shift for a manager and a big shift. So how do organizations kind of facilitate that learning for a manager, or facilitate that transformation for that manager is going to be extremely crucial. Which brings me to the final point of what the organization can expect and should really facilitate is creating managers as culture custodians. So you at a macro level can create a culture, but there are micro cultures that will
Absolutely.
exist in teams.
Absolutely.
How do you empower the manager to create those cultures is going to be the key differentiator.
And that is truly going to be a differentiator because
Yeah.
I think the last one decade, we have just seen so many toxic cultures come into being.
Absolutely.
Again, because of the pressure on managers to deliver results month on month, year on year, day on day almost. So I think that is a very valid point. And I like your term, culture custodians and micro culture custodians.
Absolutely.
And I think drawing from that, a large part of their role will also be to align to the larger culture of the organization.
Absolutely.
And not have these micro cultures that exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. You had mentioned earlier that the role of a manager has to move from command and control. So my question to you is, what do you think the role of managers will be, or what will they evolve into 10 years from now, future forward?
Okay. So, what is happening today is no one function is able to solve the problems of distributors, partners, customers, all of that. So, which means multiple teams have to come together. So, people
That's
are talking
true.
about a flatter structures and all of that. So, as a manager, earlier I used to control my team, and hence my tendency of being a little more directive was prevalent, and that was associated with one of the great managerial qualities. And I possibly have studied that, grown that, seen that. All of that is fundamentally shifting. So from directing, we are saying now you need to be orchestrating, because I may not be only talking to my team. There are multiple teams that I may have to coordinate with, and hence orchestration, ability to orchestrate an activity or mobilize is something that a manager of future will have to have, number one. Number two, more of ecosystem thinking. As I said earlier, I used to think about my team as someone who is hierarchically reporting into me. Today, the definition of team itself gets expanded. So if there are 5 cross-functional teams who have to come together and solve that particular problem within a given time that the organization expects, so be it. And hence that 5 teams become my ecosystem. And I have to have the capability, whatever it takes, to get them together and to articulate and to get the problem solved. So these are the 2 prominently.
I also see another thing, and tell me what you feel. I see managers not just leading people, but leading AI.
Yeah.
So I almost see managers as the people who will blend in AI and human resources together
Yeah.
and leverage both of them in the right way at the right time.
Absolutely.
So if you have a future manager, it'll have to be somebody who's very comfortable with the technology aspect of it.
Yeah.
And also somebody who will need to be very comfortable with the humane aspect of it.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like being, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, true.
It's having this split personality. I talk technology, I talk human being. I talk technology, I talk human being.
Correct.
That's how I see it evolving.
You just said it. I mean, and has that been your experience when you talk to leaders from across the industry? How is it evolving?
So I see two kinds of moods emerging. One is definitely fear. Okay, there are people who say, yes, AI is here to stay. I have to make sure that I evolve into somebody who can use AI, or it needs to come into my organization. But there is fear-tinged AI adoption.
Yeah.
Then there is the acceptance or the optimism-tinged adoption, which is saying it is here to stay. How do we use it, and how do we make sure that it adds value to us? Because no point fighting what you can't change. Let's make the best of it.
Yeah.
I think this gives us all an opportunity to say, how do we make AI adoption more humane? I think the job of leaders and organizations will be to say, if I am using AI, and I'm not just talking from the point of view of losing jobs, but how do I make sure that it is more unbiased? How do I make sure that it actually is adding value?
Yeah.
For example, AI has been used in recruitment for some time now.
Yeah.
Now, if your AI is not humane, it might just be throwing up one kind of resumes.
Absolutely. Yes.
So how is it that you're really looking at fairness, equity
Yeah.
in the use of AI?
Correct.
And that, I think, is an opportunity that organizations should really focus on. That while it is a wave that we have to adapt to,
Yeah.
it is here to stay.
Yes.
Can we make sure that it is equitable? Can we make sure that there's fairness in it? And we are not allowing biases of data to creep into what we are doing.
That's a very interesting perspective, and thank you for bringing that in, Sheila, because that's something which is going to be a leadership challenge, which is going to be a challenge for managers, and they have to consciously work towards it.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also feel that organizations are grappling with what is the role of the manager going to be. They're not yet able to reimagine the role of the manager.
Yeah.
So one either hears of laying off people or changing structures, but I've still not come across any organization that says, let's reimagine this role. Let's make it a collaboration of technology and human beings. And how do we make this a stronger role?
Yeah.
In your research for your book and in the book that you've written,
Yeah.
is there any thought, are there any thoughts that you have around this? That how is it that you can reimagine this entire role and make it more holistic?
Absolutely. So when I was doing that research on the multiple sections that how do we make that irresistible manager a reality? And when I was looking at different sectors, when I was talking to people, as a part of primary research to get the input, or maybe secondary research and all of that, two things stood out. One, can we shift from output to outcomes? And can managers really orient themselves towards it? So you define your annual operating plans, you define your KPIs, you define your OKRs, all of that, right? But if you have an excessive focus on outputs, it will show up in your meetings, it will show up in your reviews, it will show up in everything that you do on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Now imagine if you shift from output to outcomes. You have very clearly defined outcomes, and then you have an interplay of how do you kind of use your personality, your evolution to create those outcomes. And that's where a lot of working on self is something that is required. But the moment managers are ready to do that, the moment organization is ready to create that kind of an environment, then we have it, number one. Number two, storytelling, right? Rather a data-based storytelling capability.
Data
And
visualization.
Data visualization.
And storytelling.
And storytelling and facilitation capability. If manager is able to kind of imbibe these things, then that's a future manager safely. Because, today, because of the complexity that they have to deal with on a daily basis, ability to facilitate what do you do in facilitate? You just create a very neutral environment for all parties to safely contribute their thoughts. And that is what as a manager you are expected to do, because you know you don't have all the answers. And who knows, a person on the ground will have. But do you have that ability to solicit that? Number one, when you solicit it, do you have the ability to look at the data? You have the ability to visualize it, and do you have the ability to tell a story around it, business story? When you're able to acquire these things, you will be that irresistible manager. Those are the observations.
Yeah, but I also think that the organization plays a very, very strong role
Yeah.
in reimagining what this entire new manager will be, for want of a better word, if I was to term it as the new manager.
Yeah.
I think you're right. In organizations, we're very outcome driven. There was a time when we were very output driven.
yeah.
There was a time, however, we were very outcome driven. Maybe about 20 years ago, 30 years ago,
Yeah.
when we were building a nation,
Correct.
when we were building businesses for the future,
Correct.
when we were looking at generational value that was being added to a society. But of late, I think we've become businesses that are more focused in the short run, numbers.
Yeah, and people call it as QSQT, quarter se quarter tak.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Qayamat se qayamat tak.
QSQT, quarter se
That's
quarter
a cute
tak.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's really how it's become.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
we can't predict what's going to
There is.
happen in a
There is.
decade.
There is.
So it's almost paradoxical
Yeah.
that you want to do something for the future, but you don't have a clue what the future will bring.
Correct.
But I think you're right. It begins with getting outcome focused.
True.
So, Bhushan, here's a question that's been on my mind. In a world where AI is so much more predictable, available 24/7, never loses its cool, so patient, always gives you what you want, what does a human leader bring to the table? Do they bring anything to the table?
First answer that comes to my mind, first response is silence. And just being with the other individual. So while you contextualize the question to CEO or the leadership, first let me talk about human to human. So I imagine if I have the perfectionist always next to me, there comes a point where I'm not able to relate to that perfectionist always. So there's a bit of vulnerability that I have within me, and I want someone next to me who I can relate with. So first and foremost, the vulnerability in me and the association of that with other human beings is something that AI doesn't do. And by the way, research has always proved that that becomes one of the emotional strengths of individual to excel and outperform. Number one. Yeah. Number two, some companion for you to be able to take decisions in the moment when you can go in any direction in terms of your thinking, and there's someone to listen to and guide. Now, can AI do this? To some extent, yes. But then that's the underlining word, to some extent, right? That's what it is. Okay. And those binaries sometimes can be really a problematic thing.
If I need somebody to give me answers, AI will be great.
Correct.
But if I need somebody to expand my thinking capacity, if I need somebody to help me build my perspective,
Yeah.
if I need somebody to challenge my current thought process,
Yeah.
I feel that I might need a person
Yeah.
next to me.
Absolutely.
I also think there are times when it's such an emotionally charged moment
Yeah.
that you just need somebody sitting next to you. And when you said silence, it resonated so much. Just maybe my leader sitting next to me
True.
and just either physically holding my hand, if that doesn't become an issue,
Yeah.
or even through body language
True.
supporting me becomes so important.
Yeah.
I think that human aspect of leadership will just get honed more and more.
True.
People who are driving outputs
Yeah.
may get thrown by the wayside for people who focus on culture,
True.
outcomes,
Absolutely, yeah.
business longevity.
Yeah.
I think those will become determinants of great leadership and not somebody who goes QSQT.
I agree completely. And that's where empathy is becoming one of the most sought after, capability in an individual, especially if you are at leadership levels. That's something that has to be,
And real empathy, not what a chat GPT can learn and
no.
give it to you. Yeah.
And it shows up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, Bhushan, I would like to now talk to you about learning organizations and how a learning culture can exist within an organization, what kind of agility an organization needs to have in times like now.
Yeah.
So, my question to you is, what do you think a learning organization will look like in 2025, which is now?
Yeah, which is now.
Yeah.
In fact, and now is the future. Is
That's
what
right.
we are talking
We are
about.
already in the future.
Yeah, we're already in the future. And today's learning organizations, hence, one word that comes to my mind is fluid, which in a way you are talking about agile as well. But agile has its own principles.
Exactly.
Fluid will give you that flexibility again to kind of course correct and make those changes. So is your learning strategy rich enough to be able to make those course corrections in line with the organizational strategy, because that itself has become quite agile these days, and there's no fixed 10-year kind of a plan that organization
That's
has
what we
going.
just spoke about. Yes,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So that's one. How the fluid approach complements to the agile ways in which today organizations are expected to operate. Second, feedback. Do you have a feedback mechanism, a constant feedback mechanism, right, that allows you to be well grounded and take decisions faster, which are rooted in reality in terms of the feedback that you get? So the learning organizations of today or maybe tomorrow have to have these two critical components, and the systems and mechanisms and human beings, most importantly, taking the final call.
When you said that, what is the feedback mechanism? I remember when I started Chrysalis 30 years ago, feedback mechanism was really how a participant felt at the end of a program.
Right.
And of course, there was a lot of excitement if you got a 4.9 out of 5.
Yeah.
And I remember, on a lighter note, I remember I was working for an IT company and I got feedback which said that the trainer is user friendly. Okay, and that was what we worked on. And, it was funny. Okay,
Yeah.
but that's what we based it on.
Yeah.
But over the years, as Chrysalis has gone into more and more results based learning, we're also seeing exactly what you said, that how do we make clients more fluid in the assessment and course correction.
Yeah.
So you take them through an intervention, but can you tell them at the end of every month what they need to do more of or what they need to do less of? We found that when we really deploy procedures and processes to do that, it brings great value to a customer. Because you're not waiting for 6 months to know if an intervention was successful or not.
Correct.
You're getting to know on the go.
Absolutely.
So I think, yes, you're absolutely right. Learning organizations will need to be very fluid, starting with their learning strategy,
Correct.
all the way down to their learning execution.
Yeah, dashboards, execution, the
Everything.
real time.
Can you move very quickly from 8-hour intervention to a 15-minute drip learning?
Absolutely.
So how do you do all this?
Correct.
And I think that is going to be a challenge for a lot of L&D practitioners.
True.
That how do they build in this fluidity into the way they think and they work?
Yeah, and absolutely. That is one important reason, Sheila, why when I talk to experts in this field and have my learnings or maybe share my thoughts as a speaker on platforms, one thing I have realized for L&D professionals is the reason why they don't earn the seat at the table is because of these reasons, that fluidity
Spot on.
and the depth and the breadth of understanding. And maybe that was one of the reasons why I created a framework called as CRAFT, which allows them to, and that I patentized also, which allows the L&D professionals, to kind of look at it holistically, learn, grow, and then earn a seat at the table.
Absolutely, because if you're not talking business,
Yeah.
then how are you going to get a seat at the table?
Absolutely.
But that is a conversation for another time, because that is something that's very close to my heart. And we could get completely,
Absolutely.
derailed into
Yeah,
another
yeah.
conversation.
True.
So I know you agree with me, because whenever we've had these conversations in the past, that continuous learning is here to stay.
True.
And like you said, it's not a know-it-all mindset, it's more a learn-it-all mindset.
True.
So how do you think that leaders can actually nurture people in an organization to continuously learn? What are some of the things you feel they should be doing in today's times?
I think leaders should start with themselves. So they, whatever designation that they carry within the organization, they should also carry a designation called as CCO themselves. So their own designation plus CCO. What does CCO stand for? Is Chief Curiosity Officer. So if I embrace that, that becomes the starting point. In other words, I'm saying model continuous learning. Now that has its own benefits, and research has proven it that if I embrace that capability, it benefits me. Forget about benefiting the world. The next step, obviously, as a manager and a leader, I think of others, and then they can emulate me.
Yeah.
It's surprising, Sheila, when I curate leadership programs or when I facilitate leadership programs or during coaching sessions, executive coaching sessions, I ask people, what was the last certification that you gained? And there is 90% of the times I see that there's a silence, and when was the last time? And they don't even remember. And they talk about continuous learning. So talking is not required. You demonstrate. You say, okay, last month I did this, I attended that. And people watch you.
So here is a question. Does that mean that certifications means continuous learning?
Not necessarily. But this was one example that.
Okay.
And continuous learning can have a lot of dimensions. In the flow of work is the biggest learning that you can do. But are you, which is my second point that I was coming to, are you stepping back to reflect and assimilate those learning in whatever form you can? It could be mental notes, and mental notes would be insufficient, the kind of learnings that you may have. So do you have that journaling practice? Do you have some method of capturing those nuggets and maybe then sharing with your team members, which is a storytelling thing that we were talking about? It would be such a rich experience to share.
While you're talking, I'm actually thinking back to a conversation I had with a young brahmachari. It's beautiful what he said. He said that everything starts with you and you understanding yourself better.
True.
And you're saying that if we need to have leaders supporting continuous learning, they need to start with themselves.
Absolutely.
And you're right, because while there's a lot of money being spent on leadership development, question is, are they automatically curious? Are they automatically wanting to know more?
Yeah.
And do they step back and say, okay, what have I learned? Do I know more today than I did yesterday?
True.
Those kind of practices become critical. So would I be right in assuming that from your point of view, managers will become the missing link in making sure that organizations learn and get more strong?
Absolutely. I agree completely. And it is that manager who will have that responsibility, and hence those skills to be acquired, facilitation being one of them, and we spoke about it. These are some of the abilities that will hook the attention of the listener. Just because you are at a particular designation is no guarantee that you will be able to articulate your experiences. So those are some of the habits, those are some of the micro practices that you will have to create. So that you become the visible link rather than a missing link, to be able to educate and develop people. In fact, that's one of the important segments that I have dedicated in my book.
Okay.
As to how do managers create a developing environment and develop their team members, and why is it important?
And I think, it's so right, because somewhere along the way, I think managers are the reasons that sometimes learning is not scalable. In my experience, I have found very often that if we do not have the buy-in of the manager, the immediate manager of the participant, however much you work on journeys, interventions, learning pathways, learning plans, it could just get completely shot out of the water.
Correct.
Because you might have spent a lot of time and effort building capabilities, but if the manager turns around and says, all this is fine, just get back to work.
Correct.
Boom.
Correct.
That's the end of it.
Yeah.
Which is why we also believe in an agreement with the manager before a participant comes into any kind of learning intervention.
Yeah.
Now, what is the role you think managers will play in making learning scalable?
So first and foremost, Sheila, to my mind, is the extension of what you have just said. First, training or learning event is not separate from work. That the manager has to embed in his or her mind, so that the language that comes out when the team member comes back saying, okay, oh, you have finished it, now get back to work. Right? This was anyway a part of his work. And you approved it. So that approval mindset or disapproval mindset, the person has to work on that. And some small practices, saying this is a part of it. And one such practice that we follow is, no Sunday training or no Saturday training as a part of conscious effort, saying, okay, it has to happen in working hours.
Absolutely.
It has to happen in working hours.
Absolutely.
So it starts from there.
Because it's a part of work. It's not work plus.
Correct. So that separator has to get dissolved in the mind, number one. Number two, that continuous learning. Number three, an urge to develop the team. And once you have that at an headline level, then you will anyway evolve your own practices, saying, how do I develop my team? And there are very proven steps and methods that you can learn and find solutions to, and then get along with that.
Very interesting. Bhushan, let me get a little provocative now.
Oh my God, okay.
Okay. My question is that is L&D required at all in organizations today? You have YouTube, AI, technology-based learning. So what is the role that L&D is really going to play?
So the question is L&D required?
Yeah, do we need structured learning through L&D, or each one for themselves?
Interesting question. Is L&D required? Yes, with a caveat. And the caveat is if L&D is willing to reinvent itself. Now, what do I mean by that? So if you look at the L&D professional today, one thing that I notice when I interact with them is they have stopped learning themselves. Second, they have really got hinged to a particular metric that they have learned maybe 10 years back or 5 years back in some textbook. While I'm not undermining the importance of that, it was maybe relevant then, it may be relevant now, but not to that proportion as it was possibly 10, 15 years back. So what is the new metric? And have you taken efforts to really understand that? Number one. Number two, at a broad macro level, do you understand your business strategy at the first place? Or do you understand your business? Quite often, 90% of them when I interact, and 90% I have actually counted that, people do not know their revenue, their top line, their bottom line and all. And that's one important reason why I wrote one chapter saying business acumen. While I wrote it for general managers, as in manager irrespective of L&D or otherwise, but I find that L&D to be prominent where people do not really understand that as much. Now, if you do not understand how your organization makes profit or how what organization stands for in terms of business acumen side, how are you going to craft the strategy at the first place? So unless you are willing to reinvent yourself, L&D may not be required in the organizations. But in general, if you ask me, is L&D required in a reinvented form? The answer is emphatic yes.
You're absolutely right, because if L&D does not even know business, forget about business acumen, does not even know its own business, because for me, business acumen is about competition, industry, ecosystems, and all the rest.
Absolutely.
But if you don't even know your own company and how it makes money and where it has to make money, what it needs to do to make that money, then I think your ability to increase the capability coefficient of your organization is almost negligible.
Yeah.
Because then you're doing something which sounds good but has no relevance and no outcome.
Yeah.
It's just output.
True.
Oh, we did so many seats, we did so many programs, we did so much of days, but there's no outcome.
Yeah.
Does the needle move?
Correct.
And Bhushan, I must share this with you. When Chrysalis started in 1995, we were really just a training company. That's all we did.
Yeah.
And I think after 5 years of doing that, I got really bored. I said, I can't do this for the rest of my life where I'm going to get feedback like trainer is user friendly and great trainer. That's not what is going to really rock my world.
Correct.
And therefore, as you are aware, this entire results-based learning piece that we do
Yeah.
is around outcomes.
Correct.
And to move in that outcome direction, there needs to be staying power.
Correct.
So if L&D has a seat at the table,
Correct.
then it develops that staying power. When it develops that staying power, it can influence outcomes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's interesting. What do you think will be the new responsibility of L&D?
Curation is one very important thing. So if provided you understand the context, provided you understand the business, provided the leaders start respecting you and listening to you, So one important shift that will happen is from order takers to agenda shapers. That is one of the biggest responsibilities that you will have. Number two, can you build collective intelligence of the organization? And number three, can you build learning culture within the organization? If I were to nail it down to these, to the three, these are the top three.
Wow. You know, Bhushan, it's been a really interesting conversation, and
Yeah.
I could talk to you till the cows come home. But I do want to end this little podcast that we've had, this episode,
Yeah.
with some rapid fire questions.
Oh my God.
So,
like,
yes, but it's going to be nice rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Nothing provocative, nothing controversial. So, what is the one quality of an irresistible manager?
I think tough empathy.
Tough empathy.
That's right. Challenge you, but stand by you.
Oh,
As a team member,
interesting.
yeah.
Wow, okay. A skill that you believe that every leader must relearn in this age.
I think listening. We have stopped listening to people. Increase your listening quotient as a leader. That's how you will get to know the breakthrough that comes from the ground to you. People are trying to talk to you.
Wow.
You just listen to them.
A chapter from your book that you think will surprise your readers.
I think there would be one which I would place it as Where Do I Belong? That's the chapter, because that's the emotional ignition point for you to decide whether managerial or leadership line of action or growth is something that you would be comfortable with in your career.
Wow, and that's really interesting, Bhushan, because we all seem to think that the next step is a manager.
Yeah.
But I think what you're trying to say is that maybe the next step for me may not be a manager based on who I am and what I am.
May not be. And that's how that chapter might surprise.
Oh, wow. Bhushan, the last of the rapid fire.
Yeah.
One future skill that is underrated right now.
I think it's sense making for leaders and for managers. That is what they will need to have more of.
You know, this sense making for me is such an important skill because I see it as the skill of synthesizing.
Yeah.
Can you take disparate topics
True.
and coalesce it into an understandable whole?
Absolutely.
Can you see what's happening in the economy, what's happening vis-a-vis the trade wars, vis-a-vis what's happening in your company, vis-a-vis what's happening with competition, and can you make sense of it?
Absolutely.
Is really a
Yes.
skill. So you and I are on the same page. Bhushan, it's been such a delight having you as our first guest on the People Blueprint. This is our little gift back to the world of learning and development as we approach our 30th birthday, Chrysalis's 30th birthday.
Yeah.
And I'm honored that you were our first guest. So thank you so much for being here.
It's indeed a pleasure, Sheila, and wishing you and your team the very happy birthday, the 30th birthday. And what I liked about is on this occasion, you took a call of contributing to the society, to the community of L&D professionals, and I'm really honored to be the inaugural guest on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bhushan. That was Bhushan Kulkarni on the People Blueprint, helping us reimagine that management is not just a title, but a responsibility. In a world where intelligence can be artificial, authenticity still can't be coded. If you'd like to go in deeper, pick up Bhushan's book, The Irresistible Manager. It is a timely guide for leaders to navigate in a world that is disrupted. If you've liked this episode, follow us on Chrysalis India on LinkedIn and watch out for more episodes where we bring to life the future of work through the lens of learning, leadership, and people strategy. I'm your host, Sheila, signing off for now. Until we meet again, stay curious and get future ready.